though I did still get out to my regular park for my walks. So with that, I'll turn it over. I'll go in order of how people are in my Zoom meeting. Corbin.
I hunkered in and turned on my AC and started writing about climate change. That's how I dealt with it.
Thank you, Corbin. Todd.
Thankfully, I also had air conditioning and lots of watering in the yard. And it was kind of all hands on deck for parks for those 3 days. So there was a lot of stuff going on.
Thank you. Paul.
We were actually in Sisters. Mary's brother and 2 sons were here. So it was only 108 in Sisters, and got out on my bicycle and attempted to climb Mackenzie Pass, but turned around because it was too darn hot. So that's what I did.
Thank you. Brooke, how about you?
Well, I moved into my current place the end of April, and I hadn't put any curtains up on my windows yet. So I hurried out and got some equipment, some curtain rods, borrowed a drill from a friend, and I got some blackout curtains for my west-facing windows. Got some popsicles, and figured out how to cool my place down in a new environment, but also felt a little bit of the fear for the smoke season that we had last year, and trying to plan ahead for responding to that.
That's your second move in so many years, right, Brooke? Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, probably. I think I was at my last place for like 2 years, so yeah.
Thank you. Casey,
good.
what about you?
Good morning, everybody. I fled to the coast, but an interesting story is that Saturday I was in Tucson in the morning. When we left Tucson at about 1 o'clock, it was 102. When we got into Portland at 6 o'clock, it was 107. So it's a very odd experience.
Thanks, Casey. Erin, how about you?
So I have AC, and that was amazing, but I still had a whole thing that process I went through to close all these doors and like adjusting the AC not too low to not like blow out. I was so worried that the power was going to go out. And then my big thing was cooking in the Instant Pot. So I got to use usually I just use my Instant Pot for making hard-boiled eggs because that works really well. But I experimented with making more things in the Instant Pot, trying not to generate too much heat with the stove and whatnot. So that was kind of fun experimenting.
Thank you. Mike.
Well, we had already planned on being in Astoria for the better part of when it was hot, and as it turns out, we didn't really escape the heat. The Sunday in Astoria was still 100 degrees, and let's just say that Astoria really is not a place you want to be when it's 100 degrees. Most of the restaurants were closed. Some of the odors kind of picked up a little bit, but after that first day, it was actually quite nice.
Thank you. Still 15 degrees cooler than here, it sounds like, though. Adrian.
Well, I jumped in Trillium Lake with hundreds of others on Mount Hood. But on the way up there, we stopped at a pizza place that had a mister in the backyard. And it did make me wonder if that was a way that, we could have some quick kind of more cooling stations in our parks for picnics, because it did work.
Thank you. I'll have to have our Todd look into that. Allie.
I was very lucky. One, I don't have air conditioning, but I plan my spring and summer by low tides to go tide pooling. So I had a yurt on Beverly Beach for 3 nights during the brunt of the heat. And my partner does have AC. We did come back and it was 115 on Monday, but we slept in his basement, and I brought my cat over and we all hunkered down till it was over. So.
Great timing, Allie. Adina.
So I was in New York until Monday, so I missed quite a bit of the heat, but returned to probably the worst of it. And I too have air conditioning, so that was great. But I, like Erin, was trying to figure out how to eat and prepare foods without putting a flame on at all. So it was all like microwave and a little bit of stovetop, but mostly cold food. And also how to strategically get the dog out to go to the bathroom because the pavement was so hot. So we hopped from shade spot to shade spot. Yeah, so, and of course, here, thankfully Todd was left in charge and really held down the fort. My director's report's going to be all about warm weather, so I'll hold off on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina. Nicola.
Good morning, everybody. I had the benefit of being on a long planned camping trip in Yellowstone National Park during that period of time, where the high was high 60s and the low was in the mid 30s. So I completely missed it, which turned out to be a real blessing.
You and Allie had the same timing, I guess. Tim, how about you?
We tried to multitask. So we had a bunch of sprinklers going in the backyard. So we were watering the trees. Jen was on my shoulder telling me to overwater. And we had some of the neighborhood dogs over who don't live in air conditioning houses. And so we had a dog sprinkler, kiddie pool, watering party.
Sounds fun. Lauren.
So similar to Tim, I kept going out and watering the hydrangea, which toasted. It was totally pointless. But I heard, just as a pointer, that if you take a wet sheet and put it over your hydrangeas, it will work in the future in case we have that happen again.
Good to know, because mine toasted too. Alana.
So we have air conditioning, but we also have a 100-year-old house with 80-year-old windows and insulation. So our top floor where the bedrooms are was basically unusable, and we all camped out in the very chilly basement. Sorry. And had a great time down there and spent as much energy as we could making sure that our chickens stayed alive, because it turns out that it was hot enough for chickens to just keel over dead. So we managed to pull the chickens through and had a great camp out in the basement.
Glad you had a good survival rate there, Alana. Margaret.
Well, during the day, I tried to stay inside as much as possible. I went to a mall for the first time in I don't know how long, just to walk. And then in the evenings, I actually found myself in Ridgefield at my niece's baseball games. They did games that started like at 8 o'clock and 8:30. So by that time, it was cool enough that you could be outside.
Sounds good. Maximo.
I was also fortunate to have air conditioning, and so I was pretty much just trying to play Goldilocks, trying to find the absolute best spot to stay cool, which I found was probably lying down face down on the ground with my face right in front of the vent on there. But then I also had just some outstanding work projects that I actually got to because I kind of cleared all other activities off of the schedule. So that's what thanks.
Thank you, Maximo. Patty, what did you do to stay cool besides hunker down in your basement?
Well, I have been embarked on a three-phase energy improvement project, or lessen our carbon footprint, for some years now. Phase one was sealing and insulating the house. Phase two was moving to a much more efficient furnace. And phase 3 was installing a heat pump, which by sheer good luck, we completed just a couple of months before this. And of course, the virtue of a heat pump is that it can operate like an air conditioner as well. So there it was for quite a different reason, but it worked perfectly. And so we escaped the heat. It was just great.
Good timing, Patty. I also had completed a HVAC system just a year before, so by chance. Nova, how about you?
Well, we have air conditioning, so we were able to be downstairs. We did have to sleep downstairs because our air conditioning is not as great for our upstairs as it is for our downstairs. But actually, I spent most of the time raising some funds with a group that I do some volunteering with, who organized cooler stations everywhere with water and electrolytes. And so we had one outside of our house because we were on a pretty trafficked residential street. So just tried to make sure that we had stuff out front because we were quite comfortable. And I think it was nice to be able to do something. It actually made me think about systems too. I think someone else was talking about more opportunities to cool down at our parks. It actually made me think about a little bit why individual people, who I think it's so great that people do that, but why we don't have better systems to make sure that people have the things they need during a heat wave.
Totally agreed. I love all the mutual aid, and participating in the mutual aid is super rewarding. Love it. Randy, what did you do to beat the heat?
Finding my unmute button. Well, I actually sort of lucked out and was at a place I have in Trout Lake, Washington, which it was almost as hot there. The heat lasted a little longer, but a stone's throw away, there's a wonderful spring-fed creek that I just sat with my feet in a huge amount of time. It was really, I could have been an advertisement for, Apple or some other computer sitting out there in the creek with my laptop on my knees. So
Sounds idyllic. Vicente.
Good morning, everyone. To beat the heat, what I did was my yard has a lot of flowers in it, so they've been very rewarding and peaceful for me. So I try to get out and salvage them a little bit during the heat. I didn't pay off so well because it got hot really early. So I was out there burning up a little bit, but I was able to do something. And then like Brooke, I hadn't had a chance to put up curtains yet in the place. So borrowed a drill from a neighbor. I have a driver, but I needed a drill because I needed to drill some holes. So I borrowed a drill and put up some curtains. And fortunately enough, I have AC. So just kind of sat back with the kids and fed them popsicles. They wanted to go outside though, so I let them go out for a little bit. But other than that, just sit back and try to stay cool.
Sounds good. I hope you had a good survival rate on those flowers. Kenya.
Did lots of watering, helped my elderly neighbors water their plants, and made a lot of sorbet and played in the sprinklers with my kiddo.
That sounds idyllic as well. Tanya.
Coming off mute here. So I had a trip planned over the weekend to go down to Bend, and we did the float down the Deschutes. So that was nice and cooling. And then on Monday, of course, was into work and was fortunate to be able to go to one of the few places in our maintenance shops that have air conditioning over Mount Tabor yard and work through that. And in the evening, went to our first movie actually at the movie theater, which was fantastic to cool off.
Thank you, Tanya. I know, so weird to go to a movie. My daughter went to a movie for the first time this weekend. Thought it was interesting. Saw Black Widow, right? Not the one that everybody's seeing. Last person I think is Jen.
Good morning, everybody. Like many of you, in the evenings, we were hunkered down in our basement with our hairy dogs. We spent a lot of time watering and helping neighbors water and filling them in on watering their trees. And during the work day, I was at Delta Park at Urban Forestry a little bit, and there's not a lot of air conditioning there. So just helping people stay cool and trying to parse things to keep people out of the heat. And then over the weekend, we were fortunate to already long since have planned a trip. We tried to get out of town on the 4th of July because of the fireworks. And we were out on the coast near Cape Perpetua, which was lovely, cool and moist. So we got lucky there over the weekend. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. I think I got everybody, but people kept moving around. So if I missed anybody, can you speak up and let me know? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to approving the minutes from May and June. I hope folks had a chance to review those. Brooke sent them out last week. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve or any suggested revisions, corrections to Brooke.
So moved.
Thank you, Casey. Any second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Paul. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, minutes are approved. Next here, let's see. Okay, we wanted to take a little bit of time, first of all, also to acknowledge Paul's service for the last 2 years as board chair and give him a little encore to kind of provide a high-level summary of the priorities discussion that we had at the retreat before he passes the baton, and I hopefully don't totally fumble it and drop it on the track, which is very well maintained by Tanya's team, and give him a chance to kind of review the priorities and give people a space to make sure that they were heard, and see if they had any other comments on the priorities from the retreat that they maybe had a chance to, now that they've had a chance to think about it, and then hear it from the summary. So Paul?
Thanks, Bonnie. I'm actually going to take it in a slightly different direction because I had this inspiration this morning. I was looking over my notes and there were some really interesting themes that emerged when we did our check-in. And I just wanted to touch base on those because those weren't covered in our minutes. So in terms of origin themes, we're a pretty geographically diverse group. So we have people coming from the farm country of Georgia, the West Hills of Los Angeles, Chile, New York City, Maryland, Portland, Wisconsin, Ohio, Reno, the Scottish Highlands, and California. So I thought that really represented pretty good diversity, both of the two coasts and also the Midwest. And we're all here, we've all chosen Portland, and we're all committed to parks. And then the themes that emerge in terms of meaning, I thought were really interesting to me. There's a lot of repetition on this. So we heard about peace and play, nature, refuge, happiness, quality of life, and loving the outdoors. And those were generally expressed multiple times. And then there were some themes about functionality that came out that I thought were really important to touch on. And one was affordability, places for children and families, exercise, mental health, exploring, and creating. So I just wanted to share those and just get any feedback from board and staff members in terms of what resonates for everyone.
Thank you, Paul. So let me ask the rest of the board members and staff, what's your reaction to Paul's summary? Did you feel like your specific priorities and concerns and where you came from has been represented. Now that you've had a chance to hear his kind of distillation, I'd like to hear from folks. Might be a situation where, you know, maybe you have a specific priority that you want to address. I don't want to call anybody out, but I know some people have, there's definitely themes, but I know that for one of the new board members, I know wildlife was something that she brought up and isn't a word that's commonly mentioned. Don't know if
Doing, but Bonnie's talking about me, and I will say 100% wildlife as the biggest users and residents of our park system. Thank you, Bonnie. Sorry to interrupt. And I'm chewing, which is why I'm off camera.
Anyone else want to add anything? Do you feel like your perspectives are being heard and valued and integrated into what we're trying to do here? Because we do have another piece on the retreat summary as well, but I want to make sure there's plenty of space here for this issue.
If I can jump in, oops, there we go. If I can jump in, one thing that maybe it's not explicit, but you know, parks are where you meet your neighbors and build community, and finding it's not just about families, but sometimes your community is your family, and so being able to have that safe park space that you can show up and always see people that are welcoming you is super important to me.
Thanks, Corbin. That's great.
I'd like to, and this might be kind of buried in there, but I'd like to raise that, and I really appreciate Dr. Corbin's comments as well. I feel like that children, you know, it can often seem like the playgrounds, there's lots of investment in children. You know, there's playgrounds and services and things like that. But I think there's ways that children need to use parks, and I especially am thinking about middle school aged children who really are still children, who there's very few spaces for them that in walking distance that is except for maybe sports fields, which I'm very pro sports fields, but I think that not everybody uses the park that way, where it seems designed for that age group. And then I think that, you know, as we move into high school, similarly, I feel like, you know, and middle schoolers and high schoolers definitely choose their own paths and entertainment. But I feel like there's a little bit of a, we don't know why they do what they do or how they choose what they choose, so we don't really go there. And I feel like that's something in our community where finding ways to better invite in those youth who are going through like major developmental changes and kind of are trying to reject things that grown-ups might want them to do. But I think there's still, on that note of welcoming, there's still a way that they might be better invited in, like from where they are at, as opposed to what we might want them to do. So I think that's a priority that I think is important to share, because I think oftentimes people think, oh well, children are covered, and I don't think children at all ages and stages are covered.
I think that's a really, I was just going to say, I think that's a great point, Nova. And I think, you know, I know that Maximo's team does a lot to try and address that youth population. But I think you're also talking about that middle population, because the youth force is a little bit older, maybe high school age. That middle school age is a tough population to get at. And maybe we need we need to make sure that we're hitting folks at all ages and stages and whatever their needs are. So
Yeah.
ways
And
to address that.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I really do love the programs that are out there. And I am not at all trying to disparage what work is being done or even ignore. I think like Teen Force is awesome. Like the benefits that, pre-COVID that are available is, those are just really, really awesome programs. But I think I more mean on the like bigger picture strategy. I feel like that group gets missed in those types of conversations, as opposed to, I think the individual programs that are being offered are pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, somebody else was trying to jump in before I started, wanted to delve into Nova's point a little bit. Sorry about that. Who was that?
Yeah, that was me. I was responding to Nova, great comment on trying to increase accessibility across age groups. And yeah, it's real remarkable for me how older individuals don't use the parks here as much as they do in New York. For example, in New York, it's a really big center for gaming, for chess, for cards, etc. And then I know we have this huge backlog in terms of renovation and improving the quality of parks, but huge issues with accessibility around safe sidewalks that don't have roots tripping people and etc. So just number one, that accessibility and other types of activity that bring in a broader age range and the disabled, etc.
Yeah, I don't know, and maybe Maximo can fill us in a little bit. I don't know. I know the active older adult programming includes a lot of outings, but I don't know about the types of programs that Adrian's talking about. Maximo, can you just give us a quick Cliff Notes version on what there is and maybe opportunities to delve into that a little bit more?
Well, we just recently adjusted our senior recreation program to actually more adequately reflect the population and change the term to lifelong recreation. And so it's really just kind of continuing on that. It's continuing to be all the things of, physical activity, social engagement, a lot of engagement with our assets and activity. And so really just making sure we're kind of continuing on that ability to continue to access those activities, those programs, and that kind of engagement in a way people have done kind of continually through all the stages of their ages and their development. In there, really making sure we've got a landing spot kind of across the whole spectrum. And so we just recently changed from senior recreation to really kind of reflect that it's really kind of continual ongoing lifelong recreation. And so that is going to be just a continual ongoing process that we are always looking to see how that's being utilized, what are continual interests that people might not be doing right now, that there's opportunities for us to continue to connect and engage them with.
Thank you, Maximo. So the senior recreation pamphlet is now the lifelong recreation pamphlet, and it's still available. If I go online, I can find that and see the variety of programs that are offered?
Correct. That would be the category to look under.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bonnie, I'd like to add something, if I may. It was a point it's a point that Adrian brought up, and that's that one of access. I know that a subject of a lot of our deferred maintenance is to do with accessibility, ADA corrections, and so forth. But we've talked before about the principle of universal access, really making sure that whatever improvements we make it easier for people, whether they're technically disabled or not, removing tripping hazards, making sure doors are wide enough for wheelchairs. It seems to me that in the maintenance and so forth that we do, that should be a priority, this whole concept of universal access. And I think that addresses the question of encouraging more seniors to use the parks, as well as everybody else. So I'd just like to make that comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Really appreciate that. Anyone else on this topic before we delve into what this will mean in terms of our mission planning and melding that with the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland mission vision planning?
If I can add to that, I think one thing around access is also making sure that our parks and recreation are culturally relevant to our communities. And that might look different from the traditional ways that we've used parks before. And so getting into this idea of access as also being culture, also being ability to use and benefit from our parks, and not just proximity to them.
That's great, Corman. Totally agree. It needs to be culturally and linguistically relevant to the community. So thank you. So with that, I was going to ask Casey, since he's been the one representing the board on the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland analytic tool, what's it called? Help me out. The decision guidance tool, something like that.
Decision support tool, right, Todd?
Decision support
tool.
Okay, decision support tool. Because as we look ahead, you know, as you all know, we've been holding off. Our mission was to implement the Parks 2020. And now now we're past 2020. So we need to think about what our new mission is in terms of being relevant to what the Bureau is doing, but also integrating well with what the Bureau is doing in terms of its mission and vision planning through Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. So I was just going to ask Casey to talk a little bit about that, since he's most involved in that process with the decision
support tool.
Decision support tool. I always mess it up because it's been changed. Thank you.
That's quite all right. This will be fairly brief, as Bonnie indicated. We've kind of run through our first mission and are looking for another one. And since our mission is actually declared by City Council, it is certainly something that we can do independently, but it doesn't make any sense to do it in isolation of the parks. And I think everybody is in agreement that whatever mission we come up with, it should be in harmony with the parks mission. Parks mission is being reevaluated, revised as part of the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. The decision support tool is only one of several groups that Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland has. It was the first group to start. A group coming online very soon is, and I'll probably get this one wrong, the Mission, Vision, Values, and Equity Team, or MVVEST, MVEST. And that will be where both the equity statement will be revised as well as the mission statement will come out of. They've done a lot, my understanding, and Adina and Todd, you can tell me if I'm wrong or add as you wish. There's been a lot of community meetings on this, a lot of internal meetings on this, but I think the first meeting of MVEST will occur in August, and they are hopeful that the first drafts, presentable drafts of both the equity statement as well as the mission statement will be provided in September, early October. In a small pitch, if you haven't considered it or done it already, board members have been invited to be on that team. I don't know if any board members on that team, but it certainly would be a good team to be on as it goes through this process. And Dean or Todd, I invite you to make any corrections or additions.
That sounded great.
Thank you,
Casey, to say how much fun you had on the decision support tool, and then people will be clamoring to get on the next one.
It was fun for me to see a lot of different tools that I hadn't seen before that were used, to hear a lot of stuff that's going on within parks itself. And I always like to be the guy in the peanut gallery where I get to poke at things and not really have the answers. And that's a role you get to play.
Thank you, Casey. I think you sort of described the Parks Board mission. With that, Adina, can I have you provide us with the director's report, please?
Sure, sorry for the delay. Many screens, slow mouse. As usual, if you haven't reviewed the Bureau monthly report, I encourage you to do so. Brooke includes it in the board package that is emailed in advance of this meeting. And as always, let us know if you have any questions or if you'd like a deeper dive into any of the items. Later this morning, Margaret Evans and Vicente Harrison will be providing an update on hiring and safety trainings, respectively. And those were things that came up, a request through that Bonnie requested. So we'd like to be responsive to board members if they'd like to learn more about something that's going on in the Bureau. So as I said before, my Bureau Director report would be focused on warm weather, and the warm weather and summer is in full effect. And with that brings both good and bad. Among the good, summer programming is in full swing. Recreation and nature day camps, youth conservation crew, the teen nature team, fitness in the park, lunch and play, lap swim, swim lessons, and extended hours at our splash pads are all going on right now. Also exciting is there are 2 new nature patch designs that are being completed. And of course, our community gardens are bursting and they're active and as popular as ever. So of course, as we all discussed, we always anticipate warmer weather this time of year, but no one really expected the harsh and deadly temperatures that we experienced a few weeks ago. I noted that there were some comments in the chat about planning and providing more opportunities for folks to cool off. I just wanted to let the board know that the Bureau and the city are having follow-up dialogue around what did and didn't work during the heat wave in terms of our response. In addition, we're working together to align and formalize a citywide heat wave protocols, and we're doing some future operations planning. So more to come on that. We've sort of dialed in the cold weather, extreme cold weather and wildfire operations, but this was something new that the city had to deal with. So we are heavily involved in that. The unusual heat coupled with dry weather is also wreaking havoc on trees throughout the city. Trees are especially vulnerable to failure during these conditions, and urban forestry reminds us all to water our trees to keep them healthy. And I'm sure Jen will pop in the chat what that means. Our arborists are also more vulnerable during these conditions. They respond to more tree emergencies in public streets and city-owned and managed properties more than usual this time of year. And to remain safe, we have those arborists work earlier in the day so that they're out during the cooler hours of the day so that they can avoid the heat. Along with that, urban forestry is also continuing a really important task of maintaining newly planted trees, which are some of the more vulnerable trees. This summer, that means they will be watering over 1,000 trees that they've planted over the last 3 years in developed parks, schools, and street trees. And so we have folks whose job it is to do, what is it called, Jen? Tree establishment work. And they literally go around and make sure that our trees are watered, and that's amazing. Summer is also fire season. As you all know, there are some fires that are going on in our region right now. City Nature, which is one work unit within land stewardship, continues to work closely with Portland Fire and Rescue. We're installing large fire dial signs similar to those you might find in national forests. And so those are being installed in a few of our natural areas throughout the system. Those will help educate folks about the current fire danger status. Other collaborations with Fire and Rescue are underway to address needed fire lane improvements in Forest Park to better allow emergency access. There's going to be signage for high-risk fire areas there. And I'm also really excited to announce that Parks and Fire and Rescue were just awarded a $429,000 grant to implement wildfire risk reduction in and around Forest Park. The funding was made available through FEMA to mitigate for the Eagle Creek fire impacts and fire risk prevention. So mostly that work will include vegetation management to reduce fire risk, including invasive removal, ladder fuel reduction, and selective pruning. And of course, it also includes some outreach and education specifically to help inform private landowners about what they can do to reduce fire risk on their property. So I just want to take a moment to thank and congratulate the team on continuing to show up and serve the community, even as we face adversity and challenges, and which we seem to have no shortcomings on that. And that's my report. There's a lot in the written report, so please read that if you have a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina. Yes, we all really appreciate staff, protecting and taking care of all of our assets at this very challenging time, and understand how difficult it is for everyone. Any questions for Adina?
I see that there's a question in the chat. Adrian asked, have we had mass loss of trees from the recent heat event? Would there be a better mitigation program in the future? So Jen, can you jump on the line and answer that question?
Sure. Adrienne, could you clarify for me, what do you mean by would there be a better mitigation program in the future?
So I guess it relates really to the first part, just how badly did we do, and could we have volunteer mass watering programs in event, kind of in advance of the heat cap, or I'm just curious how we fared. I mean, obviously we're all just looking around and seeing the severe burning, and a lot of it looks like, oh, there's probably going to be recovery, but just interested in more scientific assessment of what happened, and do we need to do anything differently?
Great question, thank you. When I see mitigation from Parks Board members, I always think they might mean tree code, which you don't in this case. That's why I asked. Yeah, so this is unprecedented what we saw, and we are seeing really severe heat effects on trees and tree species, and in locations we've never expected before. And the poster child that I've been giving people is, as you drive along I-5 and look at the mature native evergreens in the ODOT right-of-way, and all the red needles on them, that's sun scald, and we've never seen that before. And why is that there? Because being next to a road is kind of the worst place to be when there's a heat wave for any living thing. So typically with trees, stressors, even this severe, if it only happens once, 1 year, the survival rates tend to be fairly good. That varies by species. Some things just won't do well, and we know what those are. I'm concerned that we'll see another later this summer or in future years, and multiple events like that will certainly drop our canopy. We will lose trees due to that. And as I said, it's unprecedented. So we normally in Portland, given our climate, our former climate, have been able really to focus on watering for new trees. We need to shift gears and focus our watering also on established trees. And we are working on communications around that in particular going forward. as well as plans for how to get the word out to whom, and how we might engage folks like our 41 neighborhood tree teams who are already doing this because they know a lot about trees, but really put an effort forward in that regard to see what folks can do. So more to come on that. And I put a link in the chat about tree establishment care. Establishment care is a little bit techy. That's for newly planted trees. And for us, that usually means trees within their first 3 years. Without watering during the summer, even in regular temperatures, a lot of those trees won't survive. So that's always required to water. And there's information on how to do that. And I'm looking right now, and we'll put in the chat a link, maybe from Davey Resource Group, on mature tree watering for you all to use. It's a little bit different approach. So I hope that information helps.
And I'll also just add, as an aside, that, we know that the state is heading towards drought, and we don't know what that means in terms of water conservation. So this is very much the confluence of climate change. And so while we think about watering our trees, we also have to keep in mind that, the reservoirs are low. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne and Jen, for that discussion. And thank you, Jen, for the resources on tree watering. Any other questions for Dina on the director's report?
I have a question regarding the heat wave protocol, and that is going to be unfolding. Is that going to be a public meeting? And are you going to be asking the public for ideas, or will you be reporting in as things become more clear?
I don't anticipate that it would be a public meeting. This will be a meeting of the bureaus that have public-facing portfolios, as well as the commissioners in charge and the mayor's office. It's both a conversation about our operational protocols as it relates to what activities we will do at what temperature and real feel points, but also the larger discussion around how to better serve the community during a heat wave. So it's sort of a two-pronged conversation. But yeah, I don't anticipate that there will be a public meeting about it. However, I'm happy to circle back with this group to talk about the parks protocols and in particular, and anything that I can share beyond that. Todd is very much involved in working out the criteria for us. And so we'll make sure that we circle back for sure. It's a really important topic.
Thank you.
Todd, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I could do a couple minutes on this, but I know we have a full agenda, so I'll defer to Bonnie whether she wants to go deeper or we can do that another time.
Thank you. Yeah, Adrienne just had another quick question, follow up on the fire question about fire in Forest Park, potential fire in Forest Park, and how prepared we are to address those kinds of risks. Maybe quickly, if we can, that may or may not be, that's probably not a quick answer. Can that be addressed quickly or no?
Well, I do know that the work on the fire lane 1 in particular is happening now. This, I think that we're, shovel ready to spend down this FEMA grant. Every year, we work with fire and rescue all the time, but we've certainly upped our game recently because of the wildfire risk being both early and more intense. I don't know if Tanya is still on the line. I think she needed to leave the meeting. Otherwise, I would have her speak a little bit more about the lands work in that area, but we can get back.
Yeah, maybe we can consider this for a future full agenda item to have a briefing on what the Bureau is doing to address wildfire risk, considering that asset is a pretty unique asset and has clear risk that we need to address.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we can. And Forest Park is one of several natural areas that are identified as fire risk zones within the city limits. So yes, we can, we'll put a pin in it and we'll add it as a future conversation.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll just add that last year we closed some of our natural areas because of the wildfire risk. And, you know, that's on people's radar again for this year if we get into those conditions. And we do have state designated wildfire hazard zones in the city that are beyond Forest Park.
Great, thank you, Todd. Okay, with that, let's go into the working group reports. Erin, can you tell us how things are going with community engagement working group and the progress on the affirmation of equity statement, please?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you that are interested in being on the group or you've been on the group, we are working on setting up a regular monthly meeting. So we're in the process of scheduling that right now. We're starting with figuring out the availability of Tim and Kenya for a normal monthly meeting. And then we're going to reach out once we have that general availability to board members interested in being on that group to figure out your availability for a regularly scheduled monthly meeting. I'm just going to note that right now, the members that we have who definitely want to be on the group or are interested in learning more about the group exceed the maximum number of members that we can have attend a working group meeting. And that's due to the working groups need to stay under a quorum. So it needs to be 7 members or less. And right now I think we have 8 who are interested in that group. And so we'll figure that out as we work on scheduling, and I'll send an email to everyone to figure out how to work around that, because basically we can't have 8 members or more in that working group attend a meeting at once. So let's see, in terms of affirmation of equity statement, Casey has been working, being kept updated from Parks staff on the Parks equity statement, which is in progress and has a time frame for later in the year. And I think, so I have been right now less involved in that, but that'll be something that, although Casey's been working on it right now, ideally the working group has some part in that as well to align, you know, our goal is, I think in the past, the Parks has had something and the Parks Board has had something developed independently, and we're looking at wanting those to be in alignment and not necessarily developed separately from one another. So that's the update on that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Okay, that's my update.
Thank you, Erin. So just want to make sure that provide enough spaces. Did anyone have any questions or comments for Erin? And I agree, the way you described the development of the affirmation of equity statement for the board, it's kind of like how we're approaching the mission vision for the board in concert with the bureaus. But you know, we are a separate entity and we are here 100% for the support of the bureau, and want to make sure that our statements, both of mission vision as well as equity, are in complete agreement with what the Bureau is doing. No questions for Erin? Okay. With that, Mike, can I have you please provide us an update on what the Financial Sustainability Working Group has been doing?
Sure, thanks, Bonnie. So for those of you that are new to the board, Parks operates on a fiscal year that runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we just finished the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year, and we've entered a new fiscal year. And staff's working on closing out the financials for the last year and making year-end adjustments. And that'll probably continue likely into August. As I think Casey probably mentioned in his report back last month, and thanks Casey for doing that. There's probably not going to be any real surprises as they close things out. Things are looking to track pretty well with what was expected. At the end of the day, it looks like the Bureau fully utilized its general fund allocation for the year and spent less than $2 million of the levy loan proceeds. So that came in quite a bit lower than what was expected. And while the fiscal year 21 to 22 budget has already been approved by council, over the next month and a half, park staff is going to be developing some internal recommendations for the commissioner on proposals for the fall bump, which is going to include some of the levy resource allocations. The goal is to have that recommended plan for the next round of investments submitted to the city budget office around September 10th, and final decision making from council hopefully around the end of October or early November. One other point I want to make just on as it relates to the levy, the levy oversight committee has been appointed. I'm not quite sure who's on it yet. I'm sure that'll be announced soon, but I think they had their first meeting yesterday, so it's good to see that that's moving forward. Let's see, Casey talked a little bit about the decision support tool. In our last working group meeting, Carrie Anderson, who's a performance analyst on Parks financial planning and analysis team, gave us an overview of the tool and how the Bureau will use that to help make financial decisions. I think it's worth noting that for everybody, just a little bit more background, at a very high level, the tool utilizes a pretty detailed scoring system to evaluate proposals based on a number of components vis-a-vis the mission. So this includes levy outcomes, impacts to different demographic service areas, and various Bureau values of safety, equity, care, and financial and environmental sustainability. Just a couple more notes on the tool. This is really a tool to help inform data supported decisions. It's not a black and white decision-making tool. So it's just to help management with making decisions moving forward. It's going to be a dynamic evolving tool. So a prototype is going to be used for the fall bump process, which I discussed a little bit earlier. And what we could see in the meeting that a lot of work has gone into this tool. It's pretty detailed, and we really look forward to seeing the results of the use with the fall bump, as well as its evolution over time and how it's going to be applied in different areas. And then one other last thing we talked about in our last meeting, we had some conversations around exploration of some alternative funding concepts, including ways that existing assets could be used to generate additional revenue for parks. Sarah Huggins let us know that one of the first items on her sustainable future work plan is looking at how parks can build out its suite of ideas in this area. So a key first step in this is going to be looking at the potential revenue for different ideas and evaluating that revenue versus the amount of lift required to procure that. She is welcoming additions to ideas to add to this list. So I would say if anyone outside of the financial sustainability work group has any thoughts on this, please let me or any other members of the group know, and we can coordinate with Sarah. And then just around this concept of alternative funding, I think Claudia is going to arrange a future presentation for our group from the Parks Property and Business Development Manager, just to give us a little background so we have a better understanding of what Parks is already doing in this area and some of the mechanics of the agreements that exist with partners and some of the potential risks that go along with that. I don't know if anybody else in the working group has anything they want to add to that, or if anybody has any questions, but just let me know.
Thank you, Mike. My observation on the decision support tool was that, there is a heavy reliance while it attempts to sort of quantify some of the issues. There's a heavy reliance on the values of those making the judgments, and I provided that feedback to the gal who presented. So I wanted to just kind of add that, and then they see that as definitely an issue, and they're working on that. Did anyone else have any other comments or questions for Mike and what the financial sustainability work group is doing?
I think Todd has his hand up.
Oh, Todd.
I just wanted to share that we had our first levy oversight committee meeting last night. Thank you, Paul, for double duty last night and this morning. And the levy oversight committee is Paula Grimace, Judy Bluhar-Skelton, she's a professor at Portland State University, Alicia Blakely from Home Forward, Silas Anderson, who's also on our Portland Parks Foundation board, Maria Velez, she's at the Latino Network, and I think that's all 5. So kicked that meeting off last night, and then they'll be getting together on a quarterly basis. So we hope to give Paul the support he needs so we can report back to this group.
Thanks, Todd.
One thing I'd love to know, it doesn't necessarily have to be now, but what the different kinds of alternative revenue generating programs or initiatives that you all are considering.
Sure, I'll just drop that in the chat. We had a work session in November 2019 that the Bureau got some direction on which type of public financing measures we should be looking into, and I'll post that in the chat.
Thanks, Todd. And I'm guessing that that's going to be the issues around bonds versus levies versus various assessments. I think the other things we're talking about also in terms of alternative financing is just ways that existing parks assets can be used to generate revenue. An example that we were just bouncing around is, when pools are sitting idle, can they be rented out to other groups for use, and what are some of the options there? And there's lots of partnerships that Parks has in that realm, and so we're in the early stages of kind of looking at and evaluating that.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions for what financial sustainability is doing? And can somebody clarify, maybe Adina or Todd, David Stazek was not on the levy oversight committee? Did I somehow place him there in my own brain? Is that not correct?
I think David's on ours.
What's that?
David is on the land use and infrastructure working group.
No. I thought he was also on the levy oversight committee.
Oh.
On the bond oversight committee. We had a lot of recruitments at the same time. So
oh, the bond oversight committee.
I had that same issue.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I was unclear of. But thank you, Paul, for serving on the levy oversight committee and so many other things that you do. Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions on financial sustainability working group,
Patty, there's an additional question that came in the chat from Adrian, and I think Todd can probably answer it. Related to financing, do we have historical assessment of bonds, levies, et cetera, their size and their success rate? I believe.
Oh, yes. Todd can definitely answer that.
We do, yeah. So maybe we can find a time to connect offline and I can send you some information.
Great, thank you. With that, Patty, can I have you please provide the board with an overview of what the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group has been working on? I know that there is a hearing on the South Park blocks later this week, which is sure to draw a lot of interest.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, in fact, there are quite a number of topics that the working group has been looking at. So I'll cover each one very briefly. And if anybody has questions about a particular one, please ask it after the end. And before going into that, I'd like to give a shout out to extraordinary support we've had from staff beyond what one would expect, from Lauren, from Brett, from Tate, and from Gary Detka, who's taken over the updates on Highway 30 access to Forest Park. So thank you very much for that. Short notice, good information, really making a super effort there. The first topic on the list is the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge. Randy and I are both involved in the advisory committee on that. and followed up last week with a small meeting to understand what's going on. Since all of the advisory committee meetings have been postponed for several months, it transpires that the county has taken fright over the probable cost of this bridge and seems to be going all out to cut costs to the exclusion of consideration of some of the things that we think are very important from a parks point of view. The East Side Esplanade, the condition of the waterfront park under the bridge and so forth. So we are following up on that and don't expect anything soon, but be assured we're not going to let the money managers overrule the priorities that you have all expressed. The second topic is Sport Court Strategy Project. There is, as many of you know, an effort to bring up to snuff some of the better tennis courts, and some of those that are in poor shape are really being repurposed. There's tremendous demand for pickleball and all sorts of other recreational activities. And so I think that Parks is taking a very measured approach to this and making sure that we're making full use of the assets we have and adapting some to meet public demand. So that's something which is underway, about which you will be hearing more. Third topic is the Willamette Greenway capital improvements request. And that's about completing really the Willamette Greenway and accesses to it around town. We don't have a great deal of information on that yet, but that's on the way. Excuse me. The Ankeny Park food carts, as you probably know, are on their way. A lot of the food carts that were on block 216, where the Ritz-Carlton is now under construction, have been stored in the old post office parking yard, and a number of those are going to reappear before too long, grouped around Ankeny Park, which you remember is the south end of the North Park blocks at Burnside. The next topic is the I-5 Rose Quarter covers. The ODOT proposed a number of covers to the freeway as a means of mitigating the rending of the neighborhoods that were there when the freeway was built. We found their offerings to be well short of what they should be. And there are a number of alternatives, I think, including the ability to extend buildings across I-5, which really begins to meet what we had called for. So that's in process, and we're really waiting to find out what the outcome of that is, but we are encouraged. The next topic is the one I mentioned of the Highway 30 access to Forest Park. As Adina mentioned, work is about to begin on clearing the fire access lane. There have been some minor landslides there and other problems, incursion of vegetation and so forth. So that is being cleared so that there is much better fire access than exists at the moment into Forest Park. The other issues about the outstanding loans, or rather fines, I should say, by DEQ for past sins are all in process. Gary Datka has taken over as the guy in charge, and he gave us a good briefing. He seems to be on top of that. If you need more detail on that, Lauren has an encyclopedic knowledge of it, and I'm sure it can fill you in. Grant Park baseball lighting, I think that's largely resolved now. I don't think we need to talk about it more. The concern was a Title IX suit over the girls' softball having to be accommodated elsewhere. The Bluminar Bridge at Sullivan's Gulch, the part of the green loop on the east side of the river was due to be erected this weekend, or last weekend rather, and has been postponed. The reason is there was a change in the permitting, and the railroads take a long time to respond to any change in agreements. And so they are doing their due diligence now. The upshot is that the rolling of the bridge out across I-84 is likely to be delayed until early next year. But everything is moving forward, and I believe there are no further obstacles to that implementation. The South Park Blocks Master Plan, which was mentioned, there is a city hearing coming up tomorrow, and there are still a lot of concerns. One of the recurring, I'll call it conspiracy theories, is that somehow Parks wants to steal part of the Central Park Reservation in order to create the Greenway. And I credit Tate with coming up with what is probably the root of this misunderstanding. And that is that part of the South Blocks Master Plan includes creating understory planting along the edges of the parkway. This is to do with creating a better silviculture context. It's also a response to stakeholders from the indigenous community and others. So that planting, which would be a 15-foot wide or 10 to 15 foot wide strip, is quite separate from the green loop. I think what's happened is that people have conflated the understanding of that understory planting with the adjacent green loop and thought that the green loop is actually much wider than it is. So we're in the process of sorting that out. But as I say, staff has been extraordinarily responsive, and I think we're in very good shape now to face the hearing tomorrow. We've submitted written testimony as individuals, since we obviously can't represent the entire board in these quick turnaround responses. But I think we have given the right information to the city commissioners for this discussion tomorrow. There are also issues of outside grants, which I won't go into in detail. And finally, the question of O'Brien Square. What's to happen to it? When can we bring it back into useful activity? And that's an ongoing question with many unanswered questions so far. I apologize, that was rather lengthy. We've just been covering a lot of stuff, but if you want more detail on any of it, we can fill you up.
Thank you, Patty. Mike asked a question in the chat. We think that the hearing is on the 15th, so Thursday, not tomorrow. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, I beg your pardon. You're quite right. Also,
you.
Lauren has her hand up, I see.
Great, Lauren.
So I just wanted to go back to the Forest Park item, because it's actually a great story. And so I'll just fill you in a little bit more than Patty did, and he did a great job. The PPNR has gone from a $458,266 DEQ bill down to a $3,950 bill, essentially, by doing two things. One is proposing to get the remediation for the stormwater done by the end of this year. And the second thing is we did submit a supplemental environmental project, which was an environmental restoration project on, as Patty said, removing invasive plants and creating pollinator benefits, which allowed us to reduce it again. So that's how we got down to the basically $4,000 bill from a $460,000 bill, essentially. Okay.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. Erin.
Yeah. Oh, wow, Patty, that was a lot. You guys have been super busy. There was a survey about the tennis courts, which I completed. And in the survey, there was a point about fees for reserving tennis courts or fees for using certain tennis courts. And my question around that is, I'm wondering how that kind of fits in with Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, and whether it's part of some greater strategy around looking at fees for things that traditionally have been free. So I think just a little more, I mean, and it didn't say they're going to do that, but it was a question on the survey. So I'm wondering, just learning a little bit more about that and if it's more expansive than just tennis courts or, and again, how it fits into the levy and whatnot.
I'm going to pass that straight back to staff because they can answer it a lot better than I can.
Yeah, Todd, do you want to talk about fees a little bit? Or maybe Todd or
Yeah.
Maximo would
Just
probably
take
be
like,
able to address that.
Sure. I mean, I can take at the highest level that the Bureau will be reassessing all of our fees, both on the cost of the delivery of the service and then also the published price or what people actually pay. As you all know, we're trying to pay what you can model and looking at other access models to pilot this fall. And so in the broad context, the answer is yes. For that specific survey question, maybe Lauren is probably the best, or we'll follow up with you from Katie, the project manager.
So at this point in that study, we're talking to the public about what people think of the course that we're suggesting be fully restored and what people think of the alternate ideas that we have for the courts that remain, as Patty mentioned. And the costing is just part of that inquiry into what the public thinks about that. I can get more information, and actually Katie will be, it's already posted online if you want to look on that survey. There's a survey online on our website, and also they will be going around to all the neighborhood groups to talk about what people want to do.
Okay, I think that's helpful. I mean, I think it would be kind of sad to require fees for something that have traditionally been free and accessible to people, or just, flat out fees for everybody. It might limit access. But I will say that I live near the Alex Ravello Memorial Courts, and they have a little foundation. I donate to the foundation. I wonder if there's other options like that, donating to a greater pool, not just to your local courts. I'm not even sure what all you're thinking when it entails, but it seems a little. I'm all for raising more revenue for deferred maintenance, but just having a set fee seems, I don't know. I haven't thought it through.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you should make that comment on the survey. That would be great. Yeah.
Thank you, Erin. I think it's an interesting question, the question of, endowing some kind of fund for that sort of thing would be a good thing to
yeah, and also let me just clarify really quick. And the reason why I say for broader access is Alex Ravello Memorial Courts is a beautiful, beautiful court. And it's wonderful that they have a foundation to take care of those courts. But a lot of neighborhoods don't have that and don't have people paying into it, So I think it would be beneficial to have something for more than just local courts, you know what I mean? So not to get rid of that, but to have a greater one too, so that it's otherwise you're going to have pretty big inequities that you already have. If you look at the tennis courts around Portland, it's a pretty obvious example of how, where you have the good tennis courts and where you have the bad tennis courts.
Yeah, hopefully the review of the tennis courts will address the disparate treatment and disparate conditions. Thank you, Erin. I do know we had Sabrina's hand up for a long time, and then Mike's hand is up.
I think I just wanted to know more about the different projects that Patty spoke to. So I think maybe a follow-up will be best, because there were a couple that I wanted to get more on, and then the list kept going long. So I'm like, I think I'll just follow up and schedule some time to learn more.
Yes, that's certainly an option. You're also welcome to attend any of the land use and infrastructure working groups, so long as we don't, any board member is welcome to attend any working group meeting, so long as we don't hit our quorum. So that's absolutely, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, maybe if you can share when the next meeting is, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, we have set meetings. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Patty. I'll let you answer.
Oh, I was going to say I'll do that. It's generally 1 week exactly before the board meeting, but I will include you on the next distribution, and keeping an eye on that quorum. The maximum number, if I remember, is 7. Is that correct?
Yes, because once we hit 8, we've got a quorum.
Okay,
so,
very good.
Are those
Thank you.
meetings recorded in case folks want to catch up after, but they're not recorded? Okay.
They are not. They are, I mean, the way they proceed depends very much on what topics are hot and what are not. So some we just have a very brief update on. In this last meeting, for example, on the grant, softball courts and lighting, and others such as the South Park blocks take up a great deal of space. But it's really a matter of, it's a sort of ad hoc thing. But certainly something that we can do, any topic that is of interest to the entire board, we can make a point of a special presentation on that, possibly with the assistance of staff at the subsequent board meeting. So let us know what topics are of general interest, and then we can make sure that you get that information in full.
Thank you, Patty. And yes, so right now, the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group meets the first Tuesday of every month, and the Financial Sustainability Working Group meets the first Thursday of every month. So those two working groups have set meeting schedules, and we're hoping that community engagement is going to do a similar thing. The first week seems to work well because then they can pretty easily report to the full board what they got accomplished in that last meeting. So that was the meeting cadence schedule that seemed to work best. So something also to think about for community engagement, Aaron, going forward. Anything else on land use and infrastructure for now?
Yeah, Bonnie, I just one real quick question. I'm sure
I forgot about it.
That's all right. I'm sure this has come up for other board members. I've had a number of people that I know ask me questions about the South Parks master plan. And I'm just wondering if there's any kind of a FAQ type document that addresses each of the types of questions and concerns that people have, so that we can better respond to some of those.
So the South Park Blocks master plan does have its own website and FAQ on the website, which I've shared in the past. I don't have it at my fingertips right this second, but I'm happy to get that to you. Any of the projects that have master plans tend to have that kind of information available. But it would be for each project. It wouldn't be in one central place.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I was wondering if there was something more along the lines of addressing the specific concerns that people have brought up.
I would offer the op-ed that Paul and I wrote with the prime consultant, which basically was focused on correcting some of the gross misinformation in a preceding op-ed piece in the Sunday Oregonian. The particular myths were: one, the Parks Department wants to cut down all of the 150-year-old elm trees right away. The second was that Parks wants to spend $46 million on improvements to the South Park blocks instead of spending money on the east side. And the third one was about the Greenway basically requiring the felling of many trees and incursions into the park. Those are, I mean, there are others, but those are the main things. We refuted those. I think that it's clear to most people. The one point of misunderstanding about the understory planting not being part of the green loop is something that has not been promulgated widely, but needs to be. But I think that's a fairly direct response. I see Randy has his hand up.
No, you've done a good job of summing that up.
Oh, thank you, Randy.
Patty, I will say that in the chat, we put the link to the master plan. It's in the chat for the meeting, okay?
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
And I put a link to the op-ed.
Thank you, Adina.
All right. With that, thank you, Patty, for that very thorough update. The last item in the working groups is the process improvement project, and nothing there has changed. For the new members, this was an effort that was first instigated by the late Commissioner Nick Fish, who at the time had both Parks and Bureau of Environmental Services, to look for ways to find sort of cross-bureau efficiencies and find ways for the bureaus to work together more efficiently. At this point, they are working their way through the initiatives, but no new initiatives have been started because of staffing on BES's side. So we're kind of just leaving that there so that we kind of keep it on the radar, if you will. So as additional efforts are undertaken, I will be informed. I'm on that committee and I will keep you all informed. I think that's really it that's going on, but Adina and Todd will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure.
I will say that this Thursday, Parks and BES are meeting to discuss natural area management work. I don't know what to expect because I haven't been a part of that conversation, but we'll be able to have something to report back on that to you, Bonnie, for the next meeting. And I will also add that a program manager was hired for the community partnerships division. I think it's community partnerships division at BES. That was the staff position that was vacant previously. And Jen Cairo and Angie DeSalvo have connected with her and are beginning conversations about any operational changes that we'll be seeing. So it's great that they hired someone and more to come.
Thank you, Adina. Randy, if I could have you provide the board with an update on what the foundation is doing.
You bet. Let me just get this going real quick. So first off, we are we'll be doing a task force to sort of rethink the relationship, update the relationship is probably a better way of putting it, with Portland Parks and Recreation. This is our 20th anniversary and a lot of things have changed around philanthropy, how capital projects are delivered. And then of course, the levy was a real game changer. And so we're stepping back and rethinking how things might sort of synergize better going into the future. In the meantime, we've got some kind of fun things going on. I don't know if for those of you who are new to the board, we produced a series of parks posters for our 20th anniversary, and those sales have been really robust. And we also produced a limited edition series with a really amazing fine art press, and we put the artist proofs, which are the sort of most valuable pieces of the run, out for auction. And raised a decent amount of money, and also kind of understood how people would see their value. So we'll be putting those out for sale. But we also have cheaper versions that are lithographic press run, and those are for $25, and you can get them on our website. And it's been fun, and we've made our money back, and so we're going to get ready and do some additional ones for a next round. So that will be a fun thing to watch unfold with a couple of newer parks and some other, I hope, a surprise that I can't talk about yet. Meantime, we are hard at work on the first festival we've ever produced. Thinking about our 20th anniversary, and some of you have already heard this, but for the new board members, I thought I'd quickly go through the genesis of this project. We thought that rather than throw a party for ourselves or do a gala or anything like that, that we really wanted to contribute to reimagining downtown. And so we came up with this concept of taking a walk together on the park blocks. And inspired by the Spanish tradition of paseo, we will do a 2-day festival beginning on August 27th and 28th. And we approached this really from the ground up. We started with a couple of public lectures in terms of kind of reimagining public space and approaches to public space with a spatial justice designer, Liz Ogbu, and Paul Farber of the Monuments Lab in Philadelphia, which does a lot of really interesting work around civic memory. And then out of that, we convened a think tank with 16 artists and creators and mutual aid groups to sort of imagine what a festival downtown would be that would be important to their communities. This was a nearly entirely BIPOC group. There's a few of them that were represented in those discussions, and we learned a lot about their attitudes toward downtown, their community's attitudes from downtown, which range from ambivalence to sometimes a bit of hostility. And what we really wanted to do was to take the energy, the tremendous energy of last summer's protests, the creative side of that, and see if we could bring that together with a celebration of downtown. And what they told us is that they were down with doing a festival, but they really wanted it to be a showcase of community strength and equity, social justice, and creativity. And the path to doing that was to honor the community advocates and leaders and diverse groups and the mutual aid groups that have contributed so much to our city in the last year, and in many much longer than that. But mutual aid, of course, has really become an important ingredient to our efforts to help our communities. And so we are still in the process of figuring out who all is going to be involved. Exactly, it's a very short time frame, but we'll be making a lot of decisions in the next 2 weeks. But these are just a sampling of the folks that we are in conversations with, both in terms of honoring them on the mutual aid side on the right, and then folks who are going to participate in the festival. The heart of it will be on the South Park blocks. And we'll be collaborating with the museum, which, if you haven't been by there on Saturday afternoons, the Numbers radio station is doing some wonderful programming on the newly vacated Madison Street. And we'll be doing a stage. We're having a little wrinkle with Portland 5 right now over the stage at Szymanski, so we'll have to figure that out. That's all breaking news. But anyway, there will be a couple of different stages, poets and community stage and more of an amplified stage. There will be temporary installations. We're working with NEA on Indigenous and a BIPOC marketplace, and just a whole bunch of different things happening. And then, of course, there's a lot of other things that are happening along the park blocks. Most prominent among them is Ankeny West Food Cart Pod, which I just came from a meeting in which Keith Jones from Friends of the Green Loop, who's been steering that project persistently for 2 years, unveiled some murals they'll be painting around Ankeny West. And volunteer efforts happening today, tomorrow, and Thursday. So you can go to Friends of Green Loop and get involved in absolutely stunning murals that they're doing. And then Vanport Mosaic has done a bunch of programming at the North Park blocks, including a history exhibit in all the empty storefronts that are around there. And it's really worth taking a walk down there. And Prosper, working with Michelle Comer, has done some activations that have been quite interesting with Vanport Mosaic. And then we're also working with PSU's Creative Placemaking project at the south end of the park block. So all of this will be happening on those 2 days as well. But the foundation will be concentrating on the Cultural District Plaza. We have a great group of sponsors so far. We're still out raising money, for this. It's short runway and late in the year for a lot of folks who've already made decisions, but we've got a pretty awesome group of sponsors so far. PGE as a presenting sponsor, and then a really interesting sort of cluster of architecture, engineering, and construction firms who have all kicked in, who are downtown employers. And so, we're feeling pretty good that we're going to get close to our budget. That's another thing. So just show you the last little gift bug on it. So that's what we've been up to as we sort of await our conversation with PPR about the future. Any questions?
Thank you, Randy. It looks like Nova asked a question in the chat. She says, are you looking for more sponsors? And wondered if you'd approached PNC and their new presence.
I'm not sure if I know that acronym off the top of my head, or maybe I'm just forgetting.
I'm wondering who that is too, Nova. Do you want to? Oh, PNC Bank.
Oh, we haven't approached them. We have a couple of banks on board, but if you have a contact there, please send it to me. I'll put my email in the chat because we would love to talk to anybody at this point.
Randy, are the sponsors only entities that are providing financial support for Paseo, or does it also include partners? Because if it includes partners, I would love to see Portland Parks and Recreation included on that banner.
We so far what I showed you is all cash sponsors, and obviously we have a lot of allies with the mutual aid groups and the folks who've been helping to put us together. And when we start fleshing out the branding, we're building out the website right now, we'll definitely include PPR.
Great, because I mean, we are a fiscal sponsor of the foundation with the pass-through of $100,000 a year. So I would think that it would be great for parks to be represented.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Randy. Any other questions for Randy? Okay, with that, I'd been asking about hiring. I was concerned about the fact that, we were going from a very different recreation model last year to what was going on this year. And we had asked Margaret to provide a hiring update as we got things back up for recreation services. And also we had asked Todd and Vicente to talk a little bit about the safety training that was going on for new hires, particularly in the ranger area. So Margaret?
Great, thank you. For those of you that are new to the board, I'm the Workforce Development Manager at Parks. And joining me today is Riley Clark-Long. He's our Workforce Development Analyst, and he's going to be popping up a presentation and driving it while I go through it. So today I'm going to provide you with an update on our outreach, our seasonal and regular recruitment and hiring, our lessons learned, and also talk about next steps as we prepare for year one of the levy. And we have some time at the end, hopefully, for some questions. So in regards to outreach, and hopefully, Riley, you're getting there to go to slide 3. There we go. In regards to outreach, with the levy funding, we invested in our outreach, recruitment, and selection work by creating a new talent acquisition specialist position on the workforce development team. Elise Brannon-Reed began this role in March and quickly started working with our community partners, the Bureau of Human Resources, our hiring supervisors and managers, and our diversity equity committee, and also our equity and inclusion team. You know, with her guidance, we've been able to make some really intentional efforts in our process. We've coordinated with community partners on outreach and recruitment, including connecting with youth to guide them on applications and interviews. We've coordinated with our internal partners at Bureau of Human Resources. We've attended, hosted, and planned virtual career fairs. We've hosted community-specific virtual workshops to provide how to apply informational sessions to potential applicants. We've utilized social media, hopefully you saw it, and print materials for outreach. And we've supported our hiring supervisors and managers in the interview and selection process. We've worked with a wide variety of community partners that are listed on this slide. I won't go through all of them, but as you can see, they range from schools to community partners like Portland Public Schools, De La Salle, Urban League, POIC, IRCO, Latino Network, the list goes on. To support our summer 2021 programming, as well as our seasonal park and asset maintenance, the Bureau has worked to ensure we have appropriate seasonal staffing. And we anticipated hiring and are rehiring up to 1,850 seasonal employees. Some of the main work groups, program areas where we recruited and hired a significant amount of seasonal staff this year are aquatics, our camps, our park maintenance, our YCC, youth conservation crew, fitness, lunch and play, PIR, and our seasonal park rangers. And in fact, our seasonal park rangers, there was a recruitment that just opened up yesterday to add more to that team. You know, hiring reports become available after the end of each biweekly pay period. And for the purposes of today's report, we use the hiring data from the pay period ending June 23rd. Each day we're processing new hires and numbers, and they are increasing. So I just want to say again, this is a snapshot in time from June 23rd. And that's why you'll also see the plus sign next to many of the numbers, because it was at that point in time. You know, as of June 23rd, we had over 3,000 applications for our seasonal recruitments. And as you can imagine, processing and interviewing over 3,000 applicants is a heavy lift, and our teams have done a really great job. However, we will acknowledge that with the volume of applications and interviews, it has been challenging following up with everyone in a timely manner. You know, this is something we're looking at as part of our lessons learned as we make improvements for our future hiring processes. You know, as you can see on here, we had over 500 recreation, non-aquatics, we call dry side, that we hired, and we're anticipating another 100 to 120 that we will be hiring for this summer. And over 360 aquatic staff were hired, and will continue throughout the summer as people complete their certification training, hire them, and increase those numbers as well. You know, over 50 seasonal maintenance workers, 20 plus staff for our Portland International or PIR events that started again this summer. And as I mentioned, our seasonal park rangers hired 15 as of June 23rd, but we had a recruitment that just opened yesterday. So we're going to see those numbers increase significantly. You know, also, as I'm looking at numbers, I also wanted to provide some demographic information. You know, as of June 23rd, we were looking at the seasonal hiring, 63% white, 31% BIPOC, 6% it shows to be reported. And I'll just say that's because some of the paperwork was still in process when we pulled these numbers. You know, as we reestablish our seasonal workforce, we are also recruited for newly created full-time positions. And I do say, as we started creating our seasonal workforce again, what made this year also very unique is we didn't have a baseline of seasonals to hire from. we were going from no seasonals to hiring completely for summer programming, which was a significant lift for everybody throughout the entire organization. In regards to our regular recruitment and hiring, which is also going on while we're hiring all the seasonals, we created our obligation, and our goal was to create 50 newly created full-time positions. Also evaluate 9 existing positions to see if they continue to meet our operational needs. So are they classified correctly, or do we need to reassign their classification? And also to fill over 20 existing vacancies, and most of those were in recreation. As of June 23rd, there have been over 30 hires of full-time regular staff in the calendar year, including filling at existing and new positions. And I'll say that number is increasing. Just received the hire packet for another position today, or another person to join our team to fill one of those full-time positions. And out of the 9 positions that we talked about, reclassifying and reevaluating, 8 of those positions we actually did reclassify to make sure that they were meeting the operational needs as we move forward. A large group of the current or the newly created positions is currently wrapping up their recruitments, with interviews, selections, and offers occurring throughout the next 3 months. And we'll finish up the 40 additional remaining hires for regular positions by the end of ramp up. And support this effort, we've actually added to the workforce development team additional seasonal staff to help us with that. Again, and here I also included our regular workforce, the demographics. This calendar year, the Bureau hired roughly 63% white full-time staff and 37% BIPOC full-time staff. Again, this is as of June 23rd, and we're monitoring this very closely. As the ramp up ends, year 1 of the levy is just around the corner. It's hard to imagine. We're just starting summer. But we also in workforce development believe that it's time to actually, and it's important to move as we're moving forward with the hiring process, to also hit pause to create the space for staff and community partners to reflect on lessons learned. So the workforce development team, my team, is collecting information from our internal stakeholders within parks, the Bureau of Human Resources, and our community partners to see how we did. So through a series of focus groups we're hosting in June and July, we're covering recruitment, community partnerships, hiring experiences, recruitment experiences in the new positions, and receiving feedback. And the reason that we're receiving feedback is we want to make improvements as we start year 1 of the levy. It's an exciting time for us to learn as we move forward. Also trying to navigate, again, finishing our summer hiring. Some of the examples I put on here that we heard feedback on, hiring managers and supervisors are trying to navigate everything and the hiring of all of these positions with the managing the capacity that they have. We also have some new hiring systems that the city put in place that we're trying to navigate. And we're also, helping our hiring supervisors and managers with the interview panels and questions. There's so much that we learned in this process, trying to hire a lot of people in a short period of time. Year 1 will feature another round of significant hiring and recruitment for full-time and seasonal positions. And as the list of newly created positions is refined by our division managers and bureau director, we will develop a timeline and plan based on what we learned for this next year. And as we transition to year 1, we also still have the 50 new full-time staff from the levy ramp up that need to be welcomed to our bureau, trained, and onboarded. And so with that in mind, the workforce development team, training coordinator, worked with internal stakeholders to develop a parks new employee onboarding system and materials. Overall, we're expecting another busy year of creating new positions, conducting community outreach, recruitment, and hiring. That's a quick, consolidation. As I was looking at time, I wanted to make sure that I got everything in there and also have some time for Vicente. But also if there's any questions, we can answer questions.
Thank you, Margaret. does anybody have, but I see that actually there's questions in the chat from Adrian. Adrian, do you want to ask them yourself, or do you want me to read what you have there?
No, I'm happy to ask the question. So the question that I had, and first I want to commend you about, just on a sort of a shoestring, how well, from my standpoint, it all appears to be working with our seasonal programs and getting the pools going. So I do work as a part-time swim instructor and have mostly been at Dishman and Grant. And, one observation I've had for a long time is how few, I'll call them adults, we have in the seasonal works staff. And, one of the things that I think would be very helpful in sort of understanding how to get, and I'll call them more experienced higher end workers, would be implementing some 360-degree feedback. I know that I've never been given the opportunity to give feedback on, like my experience. And I think there was one other, I'll call them adult teacher at Dishman. And I don't even know if she survived the whole COVID, mess. But I think for mentoring the youth that mostly make up the staff, and also just having folks who are going to be around potentially for years versus a season or two, it'd be a really important thing to find out about.
That's really great feedback. We have a meeting at the end of this month with our community partners. And one of the things that we're talking about is people that we're recruiting into the organization, how we can also receive feedback. And while we were thinking primarily of youth, Adrian, you bring up a really good point. And so I'm making note of that and appreciate that. We'll take a look at how we can fold that into our lessons learned and see what we can do to make that happen. I appreciate that. And I noticed, Sabrina, how does retention of staff play into all of this work? That's really a great question. So a couple of things. Elise Brandon-Reed, who joined us as our talent acquisition specialist, her primary focus is outreach, recruitment, retention, and promotion. As we kicked off this spring, we were so focused on our seasonal hiring and really getting seasonals in place. Elise is now starting to shift her focus on actually the promotion and retention of internal staff, and how we can promote people into positions throughout the organization. Also, she's a part of a citywide group that just started, a citywide committee that started, I want to say about a month ago. And she is actually co-chairing the promotion and retention subcommittee. And actually the committee is focused specifically on BIPOC employees, how to promote and retain within the city. We're actively engaged in looking at that and seeing what we can do. I think one of the primary things with retention is culture and also promotional opportunities. And so we're putting a large focus on that.
Thank you, Margaret. I don't know if Todd and Vicente at this point can give us the super high highlights. And if people want a deeper dive, we can invite you back, Vicente, to talk about the Ranger de-escalation and safety training. But if you can provide us with a high level on that topic, which we did ask you about, we would very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bonnie, for the time remaining. So just really high level overview. It's really more than the training that we've been trying to incorporate into the Bureau in terms of de-escalation. So I want to speak more to that, and then we can go into detail on our Ranger Academy that took place, where we really had a week to hone in our new Rangers that Margaret just spoke of that we recently hired. So kind of in the categories of what we have done, what we're doing, and what we're going to do in the future, I'll summarize today. What we have done is our equity team and our safety and security team have collaborated to go out with in-person sessions of safety and security best practices, as well as equity best practices in terms of what people have been encountering in the field. So that has been going on since probably around March, I believe. Kenya can correct me when I'm wrong, if I'm wrong on that. But we've been really going out to each work group and kind of speaking specifically on what they've been facing, what they've been dealing with, and how we could overcome some of those challenges. So that's part of what we have done. What we're doing right now is our safety and security team has sponsored a mental health first aid for each division. So since June and July, we've been offering mental health first aid, and that is with the mental health first aid coordinator with Office of Civic Life, Taisha McCool-Riley. It's been a very well-attended session. We've trained about 139 staff that has been in person for that training. And we've recorded those trainings for those that have not been able to attend in person. So it's just been really a good opportunity to talk about, when you talk about de-escalation, you can't just jump into training on this is how you do it next time. You got to really deal with some of the trauma and some of the situations they have faced to help them overcome with what they've experienced, then move them towards how they'll deal with it into the future. So that's a part of the work Kenya and I have been doing, as well as with the mental health first aid. And then moving ahead, we've also did a specialized training. We had a trainer by the name of Lori Hoffer come, and she provided a training just a couple weeks back, ensuring your staff are at their best to be the best, responding to trauma and traumatic events. Lori is a national trainer who's actually on the front lines of the Columbine shooting, and has really gained from that experience, as well as other experiences that happened in Colorado, to help agencies overcome those situations. So she came and was able to customize what we've been dealing with here in Portland, and really talk about how we can overcome those from a traumatic experience standpoint. Both that and mental health first aid really highlighted what they call vicarious trauma, and that's trauma that is reoccurring, right? We've been hit with layers of things that have happened in Portland, and our frontline staff have been dealing with, our city has been dealing with. And so being able to identify that in yourself, and knowing when you're being triggered by those things and how you can perform and be able to, again, face and overcome those challenges is what those trainings were focused on. So that was a very great training as well. Moving into and in closing our verbal judo training, which is our de-escalation training. So the Rangers have had a whole week of that. I'll go over that in the next session that we do. We'll go over our academy and kind of the scenarios. We got photos of what we've done. But verbal judo is a national model for de-escalation training. I mean, it is the creme de la creme of de-escalation. So what we've looked at trying to do is offer that to all of our staff at large. And we're in the process of discussing 4 modules that will offer bureau-wide, that will talk about, how to keep cool under pressure, how to always look and sound good, especially when you're being recorded by staff, how to de-escalate anger situations and overcome fears and anxieties, understand why people verbal attack and what they hope to accomplish in trying to get staff rattled that represent the government or agencies, what to say when people verbally assault you. Those are just a small fraction of the topics that these modules will be covering for our staff. So that's what we're looking to do in the future. We're in the process again with our director's office on finalizing these plans, and hope to roll that out. Again, when I come back, I can talk to you about how our Rangers just went through that whole process. So hopefully that was enough summary right now, but yeah, that's all I have for now with the time, Bonnie.
Thank you for thank you for condensing it. We really appreciate that. And sorry we shortchanged you on the time, Vicente. Before we start dropping off, if anybody has issues that they want to see agenda come to the full board, please just email me or Casey, let us know. But if anybody has specific questions for Vicente that they want to address, let us know those as well.
I think I would love to see, I know we're at time, so I do have some questions for Vicente, but I know we're running into time. So I don't know, maybe in the future if you can come back, or
I think the plan is to have him, yeah, the plan is to have him come back, and we appreciate that Vicente has been you know, attending our meetings as regularly as he can. So we will carve out some time at a future agenda to have a deeper dive into the training programs, because I know that that's an area of interest. We want to make sure that all these new staff that are being hired are adequately trained to address the range of issues that they encounter every day, to keep both themselves as well as the general public safe.
Yeah, Bonnie, just one other comment on that. It would be great to kind of go through what are the categories of staff and the goals of the training, the current length of time for that training. You know, one of my insights is I think there's a lot of filler in some of these trainings. And so an extensive amount of time between certifications and you know, the actual time required for different trainings. And I think that's a real barrier, especially for BIPOC staff that, you know, may have multiple jobs and that sort of thing. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, that's part of the reason that we put that with the workforce development piece, because we felt that that was an important, you know, as part of the recruitment question and how they are categorized and how that's grouped. So Margaret, if you can think about that and think about how we might address that at a future meeting with Vicente, that would be really appreciated. So with that, I know everybody's starting to drop off and I need to as well. So thank you so much. And again, if anybody has any other questions or comments for future meetings, please just ping me and Casey and we'll get it on the list. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, for all your great work.
Thank you. Bye-bye.